It begins with a strange sound. Some describe it as a constant and unpleasant buzzing in the ear. Others say it's a loud noise like grinding metal, maybe a zip being done up and down again, or a horrid squealing. Whatever it sounds like, those who hear it often feel intense pressure in their skull. It can cause chronic headaches, dizziness, and fatigue, sometimes for months, sometimes permanently. It's called Havana Syndrome, a baffling and unknown condition named after the city in Cuba where it was first observed in a few dozen staff at the US Embassy.
So these are serious ailments reported by hundreds of people across government over the last 5 years. For the first ones were in Havana.
That was 5 years ago. Now, hundreds of American diplomats and spies across dozens of countries on almost every continent have experienced it. After the initial cases in Cuba in 2016, a CIA officer in Russia the next year woke in the middle of the night in Moscow with ringing ears, severe dizziness, and nausea.
I think about all the times in war zones where I've been shot at or rocketed. This was by far, though, the scariest night of my life.
He developed acute, crippling headaches that never went away, and 2 years on, he was forced to retire from the US intelligence service. More cases emerged in Russia, then in early 2018 in China, with staff at the US consulate in Guangzhou affected.
Last year, Catherine Werner, a U.S. diplomat stationed in China, told her parents she was experiencing strange sounds and sensations in her apartment.
In that instance, high levels of radiation were detected inside the building with no known cause. Reports of symptoms in American government and intelligence staff have come in from Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Experts fear Havana Syndrome is the result of some kind of high-tech weapon. It could also be the consequence of a secret surveillance system. And there are a few who quietly believe that there's no cause at all. It's a psychological illness, like mass hysteria. Attempts to use microwaves as some sort of brain-bending weapon aren't new. During the Cold War, American spies monitored secretive research in the Soviet Union involving microwaves. Scientists there reportedly tested a variety of uses, believing that microwaves interacted with the nervous system and could incapacitate or even kill people. One creepy Soviet experiment aimed pulses at the throats of frogs until their hearts stopped. On top of that, from the 1950s onwards, for almost 2 decades, there was a large concealed antenna on top of a building in Moscow pointed at the American embassy across the street. There's one known illness linked to that, Ambassador Walter Stoessel, who blew the lid on his experience. He arrived in Russia in 1974 and lived inside the 10-story embassy. He soon fell ill, with his symptoms including bleeding from the eyes. He was told about the antenna. America had known about it for years, but insisted that it was a harmless listening device. Stoessel suspected it was much more. He wasn't alone. A now declassified call about the embassy case in 1975 between Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and his Soviet counterpart mentioned microwaves. In it, Kissinger says that America was keeping the suspected link quiet. Stoessel eventually died of leukemia. So, what do we know about Havana Syndrome? Firstly, no other country's spies or officials have been impacted, except one, Canada. But that was in a couple of embassy staff in Cuba, and Canada's Havana post is a few doors down from America's. So, it's thought that they were merely hit by the outer edges of the waves. The intended recipient in all instances seems to be squarely America.
We heard a very high-pitched sound in Catherine's bedroom, and we heard a very low pulsing sound in the living room. Our heads would pulse. You would feel like you would want to regurgitate.
Secondly, the Cuba cases coincided with America re-establishing diplomatic ties in 2015. But that expanded presence also coincided with Russia and China ramping up their activities. Cuba lies just 77 kilometres from the American coast, making it a perfect spot for foreign adversaries to set up listening posts. And that's exactly what the Soviet Union did during the Cold War with an enormous antenna. It's speculated that a few years back, Moscow switched that antenna back on, and it's letting Beijing listen too. Perhaps the sudden influx of Americans in Havana spooked them, and perhaps it was hoped that a spate of bizarre illnesses might force the closure or scaling back of the US Embassy. And finally, tests have recently uncovered the biggest clue of all: After seemingly ignoring the issue, or perhaps not wanting to know, US officials are now acting swiftly. Investigating Havana Syndrome has become a top national security priority.
If they moved in the room, the noise would follow them.
Now, testing those who report symptoms is done within hours. What's been found is chilling. Markers in the blood that indicate brain damage. Those markers disappear after a few days, leaving no trace of anything untoward apart from the baffling illness itself.